Welcome back to the Holistically Well podcast. Last week, we chatted about your menstrual cycle and what is normal, what is abnormal, and everything in between. When to potentially look into those different issues, especially if you are trying to conceive, and really, even if you are not trying to conceive, because your cycle really is that fifth vital sign of your health. So, if you are a woman listening to this podcast, I really invite you to dive in to tracking your cycle, just as we talked about last week. If you have not listened to episode 2 yet, go ahead and go back and do so because that really lays the foundation for your starting point. We need to know where you're starting from to be able to optimize our journey forward. It's just like if we are heading to Florida and I don't know my starting location, then I'm going to be zigzagging all over the country trying to find Florida if I don't know my starting point. So track your cycle, understand your starting point, and then what's really awesome about that is you can see how these different recommendations actually support your cycle health and help to optimize it over time. So today is all about the power of nutrition for supporting cycle health and optimally then supporting our fertility. So again, whether you are trying to conceive or not, having a fertile and consistent cycle is a sign of optimal health. So this is information that I wish I had when I was in high school and when I was in college, and really that I started diving into when I was in college and having those abnormal cycle charts because I wanted to optimize my cycle health so that when I was trying to conceive, it hopefully would not be an issue. And gratefully, it was not. But I truly believe it's because of the groundwork that I laid ahead of time. So, 3 to 4 months prior to conception is a very critical time. And a lot of women don't think about this. They just think about supporting the body once they're pregnant, but not necessarily beforehand. And the first trimester of pregnancy, so the first 3 to 4 months of pregnancy, our body pulls from the nutrient stores that our body has ahead of time. And so the 6 to 12 months before conception is a very critical time to really lay the groundwork, to lay those nutrient stores. So, especially if you are trying to conceive in the next year, really, really pay attention to this and start implementing these changes right away. If you are trying to conceive down the road and you're simply trying to optimize your cycle ahead of time, then these are recommendations that you can slowly add in over time and not feel like it needs to be all at once. So, what are micronutrients, anyways, or nutrient stores, I should say? So, a nutrient store refers to the reserves of essential vitamins and minerals that your body has accumulated over time. Thus, the necessity of that buildup over a few months versus waiting until you're pregnant to start to up those energy stores. They play a critical role not only for your health during pregnancy, but also the health of your baby and your placenta and everything that supports that growing new life. Powerful nutrition preconception is going to improve not only your overall health, as we're talking about in terms of regulating that cycle, but also the quality of your egg. So we don't want just, okay, we're having a natural cycle, we're having a consistent cycle. We want to take it a step further and optimize it. We want to optimize the quality of that egg that is being released. And again, that's going to be the effect of a buildup of nutrient stores over time. This also helps reduce birth defects. So higher nutrient levels at time of conception reduces your risk of birth defects. It is going to increase your ability to carry full term. And it's also important to bring into play the sperm here. So everything that we chat about, for the most part, we want to think about our male counterparts with. And of course, we're looking at this primarily through the lens of the female, but it's important to keep in mind your partner's health too, and knowing that their nutrient absorption is going to affect their sperm. It's going to affect not only the sperm quality, but also its motility. So its ability to swim and find that egg and to fertilize that egg so that you can have fertilization and pregnancy, right? When that becomes the goal. So just keep this in mind for your future partner or your current spouse, that nutrition matters for them too, and the health of their sperm for that optimal conception and fertilization of the egg to lead to pregnancy and all of that. So let's dive into this 80-20 eating philosophy. This is something that I advocate to my patients so often and that I use in my own life and for my whole family's health is focusing on an 80-20 food philosophy. So 80% of the time we are eating well, non-processed foods, no seed oils. And I should say this is at least 80% of the time. We're probably more even at like a 90% of the time. And then 20% of the time, or 10% of the time, if you're shifting to a 90-10 philosophy, you are not stressing about what's going into your body. You are enjoying that hamburger from your local diner and not worrying what seed oils it was potentially cooked in. And the reason I really like this philosophy and this 80-20 approach is because it reduces stress. When we try to go into an all or nothing approach where 100% of the time I need to be eating perfectly, we're setting ourselves up for failure and we are setting ourselves up for so much stress and disappointment because you go out to that family cookout and you feel like you can eat nothing. You are stressed, you get on edge because your body is lacking nutrient input and you're not enjoying that social setting, that social time. It's great if your family's on the same wavelength in your friend groups and you feel like you can eat anything when you're in social settings. That's great. And obviously, we want to optimize what we're putting into our bodies as often as possible. The reality is there are going to be times where we are in situations where it's either don't eat or eat something that is subpar. And I want you to know that you can give yourself grace. It does not have to be perfect 100% of the time. And really following that 80-20 approach can give you just so much food freedom when it comes to living your life, traveling, going out to lunch with coworkers, going out to dinner with friends. And so something I talk about in my preconception program is thinking of this in terms of your meals. So if we have 7 days a week, 3 meals a day, that's 21 meals throughout your week. If we take 4 of those meals, that means 19% of your meal intake. Okay, so 4 divided by 21, we get 19%. So 4 meals out of 21, that can just be whatever, right? So maybe it is lunch with colleagues one time during the week. Maybe it's dinner out with friends on Friday and then Saturday morning brunch and then a Sunday evening dinner with your family. Notice how these 4 meals are spread out throughout the week and it's not just all on one day. I think a lot of times when we especially feel poor in our bodies and we just can really notice the effects of food, it's because we think, okay, I'm doing a day approach to this and people will just let themselves have the entire weekend off. Well, then you're kind of digging yourself out of this hole when you start the week, the work week back, and then you're digging yourself back in that hole when it comes to the weekend. So instead of thinking it as like, okay, 2 days a week I get off, and then 5 days a week I'm going to be really good during the week, and then 2 days a week on the weekend I can have whatever I want. Instead of thinking it in that mindset, I would really focus on your number of meals. Think 4 meals a week I can have out, or I can have kind of that subpar nutrition load where you're really just eating out of enjoyment or convenience or whatever works for your lifestyle. But then the rest of the time, you're giving yourself that optimal nutrient profile when it comes to your meals. You're avoiding seed oils. You are optimizing whole food intake. You are ideally, eating organic and homemade as often as possible. So 4 out of 21 meals is 19% of that meal intake and really fits that 80-20 eating philosophy well. I do feel that this gives a lot of people that freedom to feel like, okay, I can go out to eat with my significant other or with friends, because sometimes we get dug so deep into this holistic health approach that we feel like we can't just live life. And I am such a firm believer in just living life and finding enjoyment in food and in social settings. And if that means eating not the best for one night a week, that's okay. And I have zero guilt over that. And it does not set your health back when your body becomes optimized for releasing toxin load as well, which we will talk about in future episodes, because it's not only about our intake, but it's also about how our body is able to efficiently metabolize what we put into our body and then expel waste from the body. So that's through bowel movements, that's through sweating, that's through lymphatic flow. And so all of that we'll chat about in future episodes, but today it's all about that input. So reminder here, give yourself grace over guilt. Guilt and stress is not going to help the situation at all. In fact, stress can be one of the leading causes of cycle irregularity and infertility. So, grace over guilt. Give yourself grace as you're working on these nutrition changes. And then knowing too, like progress over perfection. It takes time to have this as part of your habit and your routine to eat from more whole food sources. And it's okay if it doesn't happen right away. So, food can have feel good hormones associated with it. And we don't want to feel like 100% of our efforts need to be perfect, right? So, enjoy that meal out with family. Don't stress about the seed oils for those 4 or so meals a week. And really just enjoy that social time because there are mental health benefits that go along with that feed into our hormones, etc. All right, so time to talk about the top nutrients for fertility from your diet. Choline is a huge one, iron, zinc, vitamin A, vitamin D, folate, and antioxidants. Now, we're going to break these down in terms of what to look for in a prenatal in a moment, but first, I just wanted to talk big picture about food sources, right? Because we want to get as much of our micronutrients in from our diet as possible. However, it's important to note that our soil quality has changed over the years. So the orange that we're eating today does not have the same nutrition profile as the orange that our grandmothers ate. And so when individuals, especially in the holistic health space, preach, oh, I get all of my vitamins and nutrients from food alone, I want to caution you that it's very hard to do that. And it's very hard to measure that because we aren't testing the specific vegetables and fruits that we are putting into our body, right? We just know, okay, what does an orange typically have or a pepper typically have? And so it's very hard to measure that first and foremost. It depends where you live, it depends on your soil quality, all of that. And so yes, you can eat a very good and balanced diet, and I want you to, but also to note that there's probably going to be some gaps in that diet, and that is where supplements come into play. However, some foods to focus on in terms of nutrients for fertility from your diet would be things like liver. Yes, you can cook with raw liver. I have started doing this over the past couple of years. We get our meat from grass-fed cows locally on a farm less than a mile down the road from our home. And we used to only get the meat. And when it would ask for organ meats, I was like, nope, don't want that because you can check mark what you do and do not want. Now I get everything. I get the, tallow, I get the bones, I get the organ meats, because every aspect of that cow, that animal, can be utilized to actually benefit your health. And so ways that I like cooking with liver are I will actually like grind it up into more of a pate. So literally put it in the blender, grind it when it's raw. You can even put some onions in there or some garlic, and then I'll pour that whole mixture in with ground beef. So there is a brand called Ancestral Protein or Force of Nature Proteins, and they do this for you. Like you can buy it at the store and it's ground beef with organ meat mixed in. It's much more expensive than doing a little DIY version like I'm describing here. So just simply take your regular ground beef and pour in ground up liver and make your taco meat, make your bolognese sauce, make your chili, and you're just automatically giving yourself liver within that meal. I like to get liver into the diet 3 to 4 times per week. Now, I am not cooking with liver 3 to 4 times a week. Maybe I'm doing it once a week. So that's when I will supplement on those other days. Eggs, ideally from, pasture raised, free range chickens. It's wonderful if you can know your farmer, know who you are getting them from, and you can ask them, like, what access do they have to a pasture? Because what we're finding is that this is not super well regulated. And sometimes you can pay an arm and a leg for pasture raised or free range eggs. But the reality is that those chickens are in a building on a pasture, but don't have the ability to roam. Or maybe there's one little door, and so they technically have pasture access, but they're actually not going outside. So there are a lot of nuances to this, and my biggest suggestion would be A, if you have a local farm near you, to see if you can source your eggs from them and ask about their animal treatment policies or approach. And then B, if you are in a really urban area like I was before our family moved to rural Ohio, I looked up brands, and you can get really good brands within the store, but you just want to do your research. And then once you find a good brand, then just stick with them, right? But I would literally look at what's available at your store, do a little deep dive on each of them, then you don't need to do that deep dive again. You'll know what your go-to is and just simply purchase that right off the bat. Now, all that to say, an egg is going to be better than some fortified cereal, no matter if that egg was free range or in a coop. An egg is still an egg. So I think sometimes we get into all of these nuances and stress ourselves out when, okay, just come back to the basics. Like, an egg is still an egg, and it's still going to give you protein and micronutrients, even if it's maybe not that gold standard and the way in which it was raised. Leafy greens are also going to be a huge powerhouse when it comes to these micronutrients. I like to get these in, whether it's a smoothie with some chicken or steak on it, a good protein source, some boiled eggs, some pumpkin seeds on it. Leafy greens in a good hearty salad form are wonderful. You can also add them to smoothies. So making sure you're getting that into your diet. Bone broth, which is a fantastic source of collagen and protein for your body, is another little hidden gem in terms of the diet. Fawn bone broth is a great brand, or you can simply make your own. So we talk about buying that whole source cow, keep those bones. You can easily make your own bone broth in a crock pot, right? Same thing if you buy a whole chicken, rotisserie chicken, keep those bones, make some bone broth with it. It doesn't have to be super expensive. We can use things that we already have on hand. And then berries in terms of those antioxidants. So how do we fill in the gaps? You're eating as well as you can, but you want to make sure we're optimizing our fuel for fertility and for optimal cycle health. I believe in choosing a quality prenatal vitamin. Now, again, in the holistic space, I think, with social media influencers and things like that, there has been this push towards, oh, don't take a prenatal, just get your nutrients from food. And again, reiterating the fact that I think that can be really dangerous. So a quality prenatal is what is needed, though, because most of the ones off the shelf or even over the counter ones that are prescribed by some fertility doctors contain synthetic derivatives of the optimal nutrients we're trying to put into our body. So a big example of this is folic acid. So if you see folic acid on that ingredient list at all, we don't want to use it, okay? And where they'll get you is it'll be listed as folate, and then it's in the fine print that it'll say in parentheses 400 mcg as folic acid or whatever it may be. So a lot of times a certain percentage of the folate is actually folic acid. So it can be very misleading, and this is always something that I'm looking at when working with clients to make sure they're getting the most bioavailable form of the nutrients, okay? So the brand that I really like is Fullwell. So it is an 8-pill-a-day prenatal, which I know sounds like a lot, but in order to get the optimal level of nutrients and the size of some of these nutrients, it cannot be broken down into smaller than 8 capsules. So if you are taking a 1-a-day prenatal, it's probably lacking in terms of the level of nutrients we ideally would like to see. Even the same is true for a 3-a-day, okay? So I know 8 pills sounds like a lot, but I recommend taking 4 in the morning, 4 in the evening or afternoon so that we are spreading it out. So why is folic acid an issue? About 50% of the population has an MTHFR genetic mutation or gene mutation. And these particular individuals can negatively interact with folic acid, the synthetic derivative of folate, which is present in most prenatal vitamins on the market. Now, it is commonly not tested for, and I have a number of patients who have experienced miscarriage. They're never tested for it, and then they go and seek testing on their own because their provider wouldn't. And they find that they do have the gene. And we're like, well, the prenatal that they literally recommended to me that was over the counter had folic acid in it, which my body's negatively reacting with, right? So why they don't test more broadly, there's a lot of thoughts on that. But what I read most recently was a statement from a group of providers stating they did not test routinely for MTHFR gene mutation because they thought it would give their patients more anxiety. And I don't know about you, but I would rather know what's going on with my body than to just assume that I do or don't have something, right? And you could just make the choice yourself. If you felt for you personally, it would give you more anxiety to undergo that testing, then you can decline the testing. But at least to give women the option, I think would be really valuable. So all that to say, I would just recommend avoiding folic acid in general, whether you have the MTHFR genetic mutation or not. We also want to think of the fact that folic acid is fortified in so many of our products, in bread, in cereals, in granola bars. I mean, it is across the board. And so recognizing that even if your prenatal has a small amount in it, you're probably getting folic acid from other sources in your diet if you're eating packaged goods. So just something to be aware of. And again, if you are earlier on your journey and you're in college and you don't want kids for years, start thinking of this stuff now, because you are going to have so much awareness when it comes to reading labels and putting things back on the shelf, and then knowing what your go-tos to grab are, what are good brands that aren't fortifying, that it's going to take so much guesswork out of it whenever it comes to actually trying to conceive. If you're in the thick of trying to conceive right now, or really in that 6 months prior to conception window, then being extra aware of not grabbing packaged goods that have that fortification with folic acid within it. Okay, so again, we do want a high quality prenatal vitamin to fill nutritional gaps and to ensure that your body has everything it needs for conception, pregnancy, and fetal development, as well as for optimal postpartum healing. However, we want to be careful that it is a quality prenatal, so that we're not giving our body a ton of synthetic nutrients that we're not even absorbing, or that negatively interact with our body in the first place, right? So what to look for in a prenatal vitamin: methylated folate, not folic acid. So you may see not just folate written in, but it may see methylated folate and then a different derivative of that specific methylation. Now, this nutrient is in fact important because it supports neural tube development and can help prevent birth defects. Again, we want to look for methylfolate, which is better absorbed than folic acid. And of course, we can also negatively react with folic acid, so we're avoiding that. Choline. So this is a critical nutrient for a baby's brain development that is missing in many prenatal vitamins. If you have prenatals on hand now, go get that bottle and take a look at it as I'm going through this. Press pause and then check mark them off as we go through. Iodine is another one to look for that is sometimes left out of those off-the-counter prenatals, and this helps support your thyroid function and that eventual breast milk production. Vitamin D and K2 are going to work together to support bone health and immune function. And then magnesium and calcium will help support your muscle relaxation, hormone balance, and then nervous system health. So the Full Well Prenatal, the one that I use and recommend, is a really high quality option with optimal nutrient forms for preconception. I dropped a link in the show notes for 20% off these vitamins if you would like to give them a try. Now, please note that this prenatal does not have iron. So some may see this as a negative. I actually see it as a positive. So iron is great to primarily source through your diet. So some of those diet factors that we talked about earlier. And to have a separate supplement if you are found to be anemic. So when you get blood work done, if you are found to have very low iron levels, a separate iron supplement would be recommended. Having it separately is going to better help you absorb iron and help the other nutrients be absorbed that are in your prenatal. So that is why Full Well does not put iron in with the Full Well capsules and does it separately, right? So I recommend supplementing separately with iron if you are low in those stores, and to actually see it as a positive that it's not included in the Full Well prenatal automatically, because we want to make sure that you're getting optimal absorption of those other nutrients, and then supplementing with the right amount of iron that your body needs. So the other really like across the board supplement that I recommend when it comes to a focus on fertility is desiccated beef liver. So, beef liver, you may have heard called nature's multivitamin, and this is for good reason. So, it is one of the most nutrient dense foods available, actually, the most nutrient food available. And it is packed with so many essential vitamins and minerals that play a direct role in reproductive health, not only for you, the female, but also for your male counterpart. So, why is beef liver so important for preconception? It's very rich in bioavailable iron, which supports healthy red blood cell production and helps prevent fatigue, which is especially important in early pregnancy. So, again, right off the bat, here is a way that we can get some more iron into our body that is straight from a whole food source. It is also loaded with B vitamins, especially B12 and folate, true folate, which is essential for fetal development, hormone balance, and reducing the risk of birth defects. Liver is also high in vitamin A or retinol, which is critical for cell growth, immune function, and reproductive health. Unlike synthetic vitamin A, the liver provides a safe and natural form. So that's what I love about beef liver supplementation. It's literally just ground up beef liver, right? So we know that we're getting everything in its most bioavailable form. Now, finally, beef liver can help support detoxification. It helps the liver clear out excess hormones and toxins, creating a more balanced environment for conception. Now, I'm definitely not one to recommend like detox protocols or anything like that while we are preparing the body for conception because we don't want extra waste products circulating in the body, but we do want that like normal level of healthful detoxification going on behind the scenes because our body's going to be exposed to environmental toxins no matter how careful we are, just with the society we live in today. So, supplementing with beef liver actually helps our liver's natural detoxification process, which is pretty cool. And detox pathways is actually something we'll get into in future episodes as well. So, stay tuned for more of that. Now, if eating liver sounds unappealing, to know that desiccated beef liver capsules are a really good option to get all the benefits without the taste or without having to cook with it. So yes, they do still have a smell to it. I recommend, pinching your nose if smells really get to you, especially as you maybe move into that first trimester. But I like to take these, just by plugging my nose and then toss them back. There's also an option for like a powder form of desiccated beef liver, which is really great to cook with. So if you do not like taking pills and you don't want to cook with the raw form of beef liver, you can get a tub of ground beef liver. You just put little scoopfuls into your ground beef, into your bolognese sauce, into chili. So you can tell which ones I like adding it to when it comes to recipes. And it just cooks right in. And so I like to use it with more heartier dishes that are heavier in spices so that it kind of overpowers the taste of the liver because even in the ground form, you can taste it if it's not in the capsule. So you want to make sure you're putting it into dishes that have a higher spice load and that it's going to make sense with, right? We want a heartier dish versus like a lighter, fresh dish, if that makes sense. So again, I try to use liver 3 to 4 times per week, more so mimicking having that supplement as part of my diet. So I will either cook with it in its raw form or I will supplement with it, either taking the pill or using the powdered desiccated liver. I recommend and I use personally the Perfect Supplements version of beef liver. Again, quality is key when it comes to this stuff. So their beef liver is from grass-fed cows and then it's third-party tested for heavy metals, pesticides, hormones, all of that. So you can grab your beef liver from Perfect Supplements with the discount code Dr. Kayla for 10% off. And I link that all in the show notes below for you if you are looking to support your optimal fertility health with nutrient dense foods. Those would be my starting points: a quality prenatal, that desiccated beef liver, and then a whole foods diet with that focus on more the 80-20 approach. 80% of the time, we are eating whole, fresh, home cooked food without any seed oils. And then 10 to 20% of the time, we are giving ourselves grace. We are letting go of any guilt associated with social activities or eating out and really just focusing on that big picture of our nutrient intake and not getting in the weeds of that everything has to be absolutely Perfect. All right. I am so glad that you tuned in today to focus on nutrition for optimal fertility health. If you are looking to take this a step further, please know that I have a 6 week science backed, holistically well preconception program that covers these essential topics such as movement, nourishment, stress reduction, breathing techniques, and hormone balance. All focused specifically on your preconception body. So, optimizing your body before pregnancy is one of the greatest gifts you can give to yourself and your future baby. So, you can learn more about that in the show notes as well. So much good stuff for you in there. And I will see you next week for all things environment and toxin load. I will see you then.